At the hearing on my grandmother's will, my brother's lawyer accused me of manipulation. Then my 11-year-old son took out a flash drive and said, "Grandma told me to give them this if they lied." The entire courtroom fell silent. The moment Austin's lawyer accused me of manipulation, I felt the heat crawl up my neck. Not because I was guilty, but because I'd been waiting for this exact moment. Not even 3 minutes into the hearing and they came out swinging. Franklin, my brother's overpriced attorney, stood there acting like he had the smoking gun. "This will was not written freely," he said. "It is our firm belief that Betty coerced her grandmother, took advantage of her declining mental state, and forged or otherwise tampered with this document to secure the estate for herself." My brother just sat there smugly, hands folded like he already owned the house, the accounts, the land, everything. He'd always been good at playing innocent. A golden child. Got out of helping with grandma years ago but would show up for family dinners acting like he visited every weekend. After grandpa died it was just her. And me. He never saw the slow steps, the falls, the mornings she forgot where she was. He never smelled the burn marks on pots she left on the stove or had to clean out her fridge when she forgot food for weeks. He didn't sit next to her in the clinic when they told her she was in early-stage dementia. But I did. So when Grandma asked me to help her make some changes to her will, I didn't question it. She said she had something special in mind and didn't want Austin involved. "He only shows up when he thinks there's something to take," she said. And now here he was trying to do just that. The judge looked over her glasses at me like she wanted me to respond. But before I could say anything, Liam stood up. My 11-year-old. He didn't even look nervous. He just reached into his backpack, pulled out a flash drive and held it up. "Grandma told me to give them this if they lied." That sentence hit the room like a bomb. The judge asked him to approach. Diane looked at me and I nodded. Liam walked up and handed her the drive without saying another word. Franklin started objecting immediately. Something about inadmissible and no verification of source. But the judge raised a hand and told him to sit down. She inserted the drive into her laptop. It took about 10 seconds for the video to load. The screen on the courtroom monitor flickered. Then there she was. Grandma. Sitting in her floral armchair, daylight pouring in through the kitchen window behind her. She looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this," she said, "then someone's lying about my will." The room went completely still. Even Franklin stopped talking. She continued. "I asked Betty to help me change things because I'm not stupid and I know what people act like when they think you've got something worth taking. Austin hasn't been around in years. He doesn't get to have anything just because we share a last name. I didn't know about the video. I swear to God I had no idea she made this." She looked tired but her voice was clear. Her eyes sharper than I remembered. "I want everything to go to Betty and Liam. They were here for me. They didn't ask for anything. That's how I know they deserve it." He paused then smiled a little. "If Austin's upset he can sue me. But I won't be answering." The video ended. No one spoke. And I could already see it in Austin's face. His plan had just fallen apart. But it was what came next that no one, not even I, was ready for. The judge didn't speak for a long time after the video ended. She just stared at the screen like she was replaying it in her mind. Franklin tried to recover, stumbling over some technical argument about capacity and undue influence, but it was weak. Even he could tell the tide had turned. What no one else seemed to realize yet, at least not until Diane leaned over and whispered it in my ear, was that the video didn't just defend the will. It proved Grandma had full awareness of her decisions. She knew who was around her. She named names. She stated her intentions directly. It was a legal goldmine. The judge asked the bailiff to make a copy of the video and add it to the court record. While they were doing that, Liam stood there beside me, still calm. And then he said, "There's something else on the drive." Everyone turned. The judge blinked. "What do you mean, son?" Liam pointed. "She told me to tell you that the video was the backup plan. But the real thing is in the folder called August." Diane and I locked eyes. She hadn't seen it either. The clerk navigated through the flash drive's contents. There were a few folders, most of them named after months. But the one marked August had a single file in it. It was a scanned letter, dated 6 months ago. Typed, signed, notarized. And at the top in bold, revocation of prior wills and codicils. It was a legal revocation document. Grandma had voided every previous version of her will, publicly and officially in front of a notary. This wasn't just a change, this was her clearing the slate and starting fresh. And attached to it in the same folder was a short voice memo. They played it. It was Grandma again. I already told Betty not to open this unless someone tried something nasty. Austin, if you're hearing this, I'm disappointed but not surprised. You made your choices. You stopped calling. You stopped showing up. But you always loved pretending you were the favorite. Well, this is your answer. You're not. A sound came from Austin's side of the courtroom. Something between a choke and a laugh. He stood up. You all think this proves something? He said. She was old. You're really going to take the word of a woman with dementia over mine? No one answered. That's when the judge leaned forward and said, Mr. Ellis, are you making a statement or a confession? It was quiet for a beat. Then he snapped. Austin turned to Franklin, shoved his chair aside and muttered, I told you we should have destroyed that drive. That did it. The judge raised her hand. Excuse me, repeat that? But it was already too late. Diane was already standing, asking for a motion to pause proceedings and consider whether opposing counsel's client had just admitted to evidence tampering. And that's when everything began to unravel. The courtroom wasn't quiet anymore. The judge ordered everyone to sit. Franklin, clearly panicked, tried to backpedal. Your Honor, my client was speaking out of frustration. That was not an admission. But the judge was already writing something. Then she asked the court recorder to read back Austin's last sentence verbatim. I told you we should have destroyed that drive. No one in their right mind could twist that into anything innocent. Franklin started whispering to Austin, but Austin shook him off. His face had gone a shade I'd never seen before. He looked like a man who realized the floor was falling out from under him, and he was the one who'd pulled the lever. The judge turned to me. Ms. Ellis, were you aware of the contents of this flash drive before today? No, Your Honor. She nodded. And your son? He told me Grandma gave it to him, but he didn't say what was on it. I thought it was just a letter. Maybe pictures. Liam was still sitting quietly. The judge looked over at him. Thank you for bringing this forward. Your grandmother was wise to trust you. Franklin tried to redirect the conversation. He asked for a recess. The judge denied it. He then asked that the revocation document and voice memo not be admitted until verified by a handwriting expert and digital forensics. Fine, the judge said. We'll verify it. But until then, the video and audio evidence stand. And your client's statement is part of the record. Then she looked at Austin. Mr. Ellis, I'm warning you. If I find even the faintest proof that you attempted to suppress or destroy any part of your grandmother's will or testamentary documents, we're not talking about a will contest anymore. We're talking about fraud. Possibly obstruction. Austin didn't speak. He just sat back down and glared straight ahead. But it wasn't over. The judge motioned for the bailiff to bring over a document from the court file. It was the original contested will, Grandma's final, notarized version, leaving everything to me and Liam. She compared the signature on the will to the one in the scanned revocation letter. Then she asked the clerk to bring up another file, the one Austin had submitted. An older version, supposedly Grandma's true will, leaving everything to both of us. That's when it got worse for him. The signature on Austin's version was off. Just slightly. Not enough to notice if you didn't know what you were looking at. But side by side. It was obvious. The curl of the M in her middle name was too sharp. And Grandma never dotted her I's that way. The judge stared at the page, then turned to Austin. Mr. Ellis, who gave you this copy? Austin didn't answer. She asked again. And that's when he said something I'll never forget. He pointed at Franklin. He told me it would hold up. The room exploded. Franklin stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. That is absolutely false, he said. Your Honor, my client is making baseless accusations under stress. But it was too late. The judge raised her hand for silence. Mr. Franklin, I'll remind you that you are an officer of this court. And now your own client is alleging that you knowingly submitted a forged legal document. Are you saying he's lying under oath? Franklin froze. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Austin leaned forward, both elbows on the table, and said, He told me the signature just had to look close enough. That no one checks these things if there's no challenge. We filed it because he said we could make Betty look unstable, and if I played dumb, the court would split it 50-50 just to avoid a fight. I felt something shift in the room then. It was like the air itself turned cold. The judge called for a recess, but not for the reasons Franklin had hoped for. She ordered the bailiff to escort both Austin and Franklin into a side chamber for questioning. Diane leaned toward me, barely able to hide her grin. They just handed us the case. Liam tugged my sleeve and asked if we were going to lose Grandma's house. No, I told him. We're not losing anything. We sat for 30 minutes, maybe more. People whispered. The clerk made phone calls. The judge didn't return. I don't think anyone in that room knew what was happening behind that chamber door. But then the court officer came back and quietly handed something to the clerk. A few minutes later, the judge returned with 2 documents in her hand. She looked tired. But when she spoke, her voice was clear. This court has reviewed new statements and evidence that raise substantial concerns about the authenticity of the documents submitted by Mr. Ellis and Mr. Franklin. At this time, we are referring both individuals for investigation into potential fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to defraud the court. Gasps. No exaggeration, actual gasps. He turned to me. Ms. Ellis, your grandmother's final will, supported by both the video and independent revocation, is hereby upheld in full. You are the sole beneficiary of her estate. I should have felt relief. Maybe even joy. But mostly I just felt numb. It wasn't over. Not really. Franklin had built a case not just around lies, but around the idea that I would break. That I wouldn't fight. That I didn't have proof. He hadn't counted on Grandma being smarter than all of them. And he definitely hadn't counted on Liam. They walked Franklin out in handcuffs. Not a dramatic arrest, but enough for every reporter in the hallway to start filming. I saw one of the clerks whisper to another, something about, never seen a lawyer sink this fast. I didn't say anything. I didn't feel like gloating. Austin didn't get cuffed. Not yet, anyway. But he didn't look like a man who had won anything. When he walked past me, he didn't say a word. He didn't even look at Liam. Just kept walking, face pale, jaw locked, hands shoved into his coat pockets like he was still trying to hold something together. He was done. Outside, Diane pulled me aside. She told me the DA would likely open a formal case. Said Austin might try to claim he was manipulated by Franklin, that he didn't know it was forged. But that the video and his own words in court made that unlikely to hold. The moment he said, "We should have destroyed that drive," he basically buried himself. Liam asked if Grandma knew that would happen. I didn't know how to answer. But later that night, while I was going through some of her boxes, I found a sticky note tucked between 2 of her old recipe books. It said, "If things get ugly, don't panic. Let the truth be the loudest person in the room." It was her handwriting. No mistaking it. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. That's when it hit me. She'd planned this. Not just the will. Not just the video. But the exact way it would fall apart if Austin tried anything. She knew him. She knew how his mind worked. And she didn't bother trying to stop him. He just waited. Grandma didn't leave behind a fortune. But the house, the land, the modest retirement savings, it meant stability. It meant I could finally breathe again. And for Liam it meant college. Security. The future. He sat on the living room floor that night, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl, watching cartoons like it was just any other Thursday. But he wasn't just a kid anymore. He had done something brave. And somehow I think she knew he would. The house felt different after the hearing. Not just because I knew it was mine now, really mine, but because it finally felt like she was still here. Not in the spiritual, candlelit, whisper through the curtains way. But in the real stuff. The sharp way she labeled boxes in the basement. The extra toothbrush in the downstairs bathroom, just in case. The stack of crossword puzzle books in her nightstand drawer, each one with exactly 2 pages unfinished. I found more notes. Not hidden. Just placed. Like she wanted me to find them, but not right away. One was folded into her checkbook. "You're stronger than you think. Don't forget who showed you how to be." Another was taped inside her spice cabinet. "Don't toss the cinnamon. It's not expired. I just like the old brand." And in a locked drawer in her bedroom I found a small envelope. Inside, a single key, a printout of her bank accounts, and a sticky note. For Liam's future. Tell him to do something good with it. Not loud. Good. I cried then. Harder than I had at her funeral. Not because she left us things, but because she knew what was coming. She'd seen the way Austin had drifted. She knew how he operated. And she built something stronger than any courtroom. She built proof. She left behind a will, yes. But she also left behind a message. That showing up matters. That love doesn't need a spotlight. That the quiet, everyday kind, the rides to appointments, the meals reheated a dozen times, the medicine sorted weekly into pill boxes. That's what sticks. Austin was eventually charged. They caught him in one lie too many. Said he'd found that older will in Grandma's attic. Problem was, he told a different version of that same story in 2 separate depositions. He's still waiting for sentencing. Franklin lost his license. I heard he's under investigation in 2 other counties now. Liam. He started volunteering at the community center 2 months later. Said Grandma would have liked that. He's saving the money for college. Wants to study engineering. Said maybe one day he'll build houses like hers. Not fancy. Just solid. Sometimes I sit out on the porch with a cup of coffee and picture her in that same chair, the one I use now. Watching the street. Listening to the wind. She didn't need to haunt this house. She left behind something better. She left behind the truth. And that was enough to save us.